It is my current goal to beat the game of Pokemon Yellow every single week in a solo challenge using all 151 Pokedex entries for this game. And this week we are taking a look at the flying type Pokemon Doduo. I love Doduo's design. I prefer it to Dodrio. I think there's just something about how cute this one is. It is just so, it looks fluffy, although I'm certain that those are technically feathers, but it looks like a ball of fluff. And I mean, again, it's just so adorable. I really love this design. There's just something about the way its little face is as well. Such sweet, kind, cute little eyes. But it also always instantly makes me think of that very funny, it's not even necessarily a webcomic, it's just like a meme, I guess, that came out over the internet based off of a very cursed Pokemon fusion of Bellsprout and Doduo. Do you love me, brother? Be strong, Clarence. Be strong for mother. Another great piece of Doduo artwork and animation that I really truly love and I would strongly recommend is there's a YouTube video, which I will link in the description, from a series that is basically Planet Earth, but it's for Pokemon, and it's by a YouTuber named Enlarged Kai. He has a Patreon channel where he does a lot of 3D artwork and does these little animated series about the life of Pokemon. And it's really incredible. It's extremely well narrated as well. It's a truly beautiful work of art. But the Doduo one is easily my favorite one, just from the concept of the fact that one of the heads can fall asleep while the other one keeps it going. And then there's just also this great world building about all of them traveling in packs. There is a shiny Doduo in this episode as well, if you can spot it. And of course, there is some really amazing work in terms of how this Pokemon actually uses the move Fly. Truly something that you have to go witness for yourself. I cannot recommend this one enough, so go check that one out. And speaking of the move Fly, let's just take a quick look at the moves that we can learn here. Obviously, we can learn Fly, but the huge things that are going to be a thing to kind of take a look at for this run is going to be obviously Peck, because that's what we start off with. And then there's a large gap between the next few moves, but the main ones that we want to take a look at are Drill Peck, which are going to be absolutely spectacular. It's stronger than Fly and only takes one move. Then we get to skip over Rage because that's a terrible one, but Tri Attack will also be something that hits quite hard and has some options with what it kind of has as a secondary effect. And then, of course, you've got Agility, which is going to be huge for Generation 1 games because of the badge boost glitch. We'll come back to that one later, don't worry. And then, as always, a move you love to see on any of these runs. I know you love it. It's Body Slam. And when you look at this is going to be basically the same situation as all the other bird types that we've had so far. It's a normal flying type, which means that that's basically every single move that we can use. There are a couple of psychic types in things like, Reflect or Rest, which is decent. And then, of course, almost every single Pokemon learns Toxic in this generation. But the big thing here really is just the normal and the flying type moves, which will actually be great for us because that means every move that we're going to be using, with the exception of Agility, is going to have a same type attack bonus. But Agility also doesn't really matter because that's a stat changing move anyway. And like I said, we're going to come back to that one for the badge boost glitch in a little bit. But the other thing, too, is the fact that when you look at the other bird Pokemon that we've used so far, I've had to use Mimic. And I actually feel fairly confident that this Pokemon can do it without Mimic and in a fairly comparable amount of time. Which does mean that if those other Pokemon did not use Mimic, I think that they would take a considerable longer period of time in order to complete the game. So I think that this is going to be a pretty interesting run for this guy, and it does mean that we have to do something that we typically do, which is a lot of grinding in the beginning of the game, just because we don't have anything that's really a good answer for Brock. But this Pokemon does have a good attack stat. Our defense is questionable, and even more questionable, in fact, actually just absolute terrible, is our special, which is going to be something that comes more into an issue in the late game, specifically the Elite Four. That's really our biggest concern for that special. It could be pretty bad against someone like Surge, for example, or even Misty, who's going to mostly use things like Bubble Beam and Water Gun. But really, it's just going to boil down to this bird being faster than and everything and how hard it can hit, because the attack stat is quite good and that speed is also really great. So if we can stay ahead of the curve, perhaps this little bird can win out. And something that I don't always show in these runs is whether or not I choose to go up against the rival. Now, anytime you see a Pokemon that really struggles in the beginning and needs as many levels as it possibly can to go up against Brock, just know that whether or not I show that footage, for sure that means that we have gone back to fight our rival again, because we need that boosted experience that we get from fighting a trainer versus a Pokemon in the wild. And today is no exception. It gets us a little closer to level 13, but we still have a ways to go, which is why we take about 12 minutes overall to level up all the way to a little past level 18. My hope here was that I was going to be able to get through the junior trainer and get to level 19, which I just barely missed. I didn't think I needed to get all the way to level 20 just to beat Brock, although Growl would help against his Bide move, because I could spam that during the time that he's building up his attack and potentially avoid some stuff. It really just boils down to the fact that I think our attack stat is decent enough that we can kind of eke this one out. It's very close. If he doesn't go for Screech there, I think if he just kind of goes for Bind or multiple tackles, I think we lose that. But this time we do win out with the factor of just kind of raw power, really. So good job to him. And then, of course, that means that we make our way through Mount Moon and immediately go face our rival at Nugget Bridge. At this point, we are pretty leveled because we had to go so far up for the Onyx fight. So not to sound like a broken record in this section of basically every video, but really this rival fight is not that difficult on a solo challenge, or at least not for a strong majority of Pokemon. You know, your bug Pokemon might struggle, but here we don't. Even with the accuracy debuffs, it doesn't take long for Doduo to make good work of his team. And I will say I'm a little surprised at how long it took me to get through all of Nugget Bridge and get up to Bill. It took us about 4 minutes. I kind of felt like for sure this bird would have gone a little bit faster than that, but still at about 30 minutes getting to Misty's gym still feels pretty decent for this Pokemon, just considering, again, we're a base Pokemon here. We're not, evolved or anything like that. And also, it is just one of those things where we are now going up against a gym and a gym leader specifically that has the advantage on that special. Like, you can see how, even though it's not super effective, Water Gun does a lot of damage. And it gets us down to 3 health before I finish it off with 3 health left over for myself, which if it used Bubble Beam at any point, that would have been pretty bad. That would have been a reset right there. And up next, of course, is one of my favorite pieces of music in all of this generation. We are now on the SS Anne. You can definitely see a little bit of internal struggle as I think to myself, should I just go fight and train a little bit first, or should I just go pick up Body Slam? But since it's always my first stop, I figured that the best chain of operations here would be to get Body Slam, teach it anyway, and then start training, because you never want to just assume that you've picked it up and then accidentally miss it and never have it again, because this is your one shot. This is your one true shot at picking up this TM, and it's going to be on this learn pool for the entire game from here on out. So, you definitely want to make sure that you pick that up. After some of that training that I mentioned previously, because we want to be prepared, we're not going to be ready for Lieutenant Surge just yet, but we are prepared for the third rival team. Drill Peck absolutely annihilates this team, much like I know Lieutenant Surge will do to me. So therefore, we are going to skip Surge for now, and we are going to move on to the Rock Tunnel. Here in the Rock Tunnel, we have a trainer in particular that is unavoidable, and sometimes is a real problem for all of the bird type Pokemon, and obviously like any of the bug ones, just because of how powerful Rock Throw is, but then also Self-Destruct is pretty devastating. But today, Self-Destruct does not take out Doduo, and so we get to move on to Celadon City. Hip hip hooray, yippee. Okay, so here's the deal. I stopped by the Celadon Mart, Picked up a couple of items just to boost some stats and to pre-teach Tri-Attack, although we did not need it for this area. And then after that, I immediately came here. We have not gone to Rocket Hideout just yet, but we do come here for the 4th badge, skipping the 3rd one. And in this moment, you will see that I have one-shot every single thing, and I beat all of the trainers in this gym, plus Erica, and make it back out the door in sub 2 minutes. That is feeling pretty speedrunner-ish, despite the rest of this run not definitely being probably speedrunner-ish. And I think a large example of that is actually what immediately comes after, which is getting through all of the secret hideout for Team Rocket, which, depending on the Pokemon that you're doing, can be optional. I felt like Doduo probably would need it for the long run, but I did also spend 5 full minutes here. I don't think I need to spend that much time in this area. I think we just need to mostly hit the main fights that you kind of can't avoid once you're in here to do these things. I think there was a lot of stuff that probably was just sort of some fluff that maybe got me an extra level, possibly, that we'll see, I guess, if it really pays off. But this for sure, this immediate fight and the one before it definitely will help. And now we have the Silph Scope and we can dig our way out of here. And after that, we're still going to skip the 3rd gym. We're actually going to go back to the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town first. Just the more that we can do, the better. We're going to go ahead and go up against the 4th rival team here. At this point, Body Slam or Drill Peck will still kind of fully sweep this team. And then we can move on to the top, get that Poke Flute, and then we can use that to free up the path down to Fuchsia City after making another stop. Did you guess which stop it would be? That's right, we had to come back to Surge eventually. I mean, we literally need to. So here we are up against Surge. We for sure outspeed now. We definitely can one-shot him. I would call him trash as usual, but I'll let him slide today since technically he would have kicked my butt if I did this fight in the normal order of things. I'll also pick up Squirtle, which will be good because then that will have Surf on our team. And now that we have him squared away, we can now head back to Fuchsia. And here we have something that actually feels quite good compared to many of the runs we've actually had so far on this channel. There is a lot that happens just in terms of how stats work out and what is effective against what. And sometimes you get to Koga's gym and there's just a reason to need to keep healing. A lot of the times it's just that like maybe the special isn't great, and because of that, if we don't outspeed or if we don't have enough attack power going into it, we sometimes are not one-shotting or maybe even two-shotting some of these things. And so we're taking a lot of damage and then having to leave, heal, come back, whatever. If I'm smart, sometimes I'll bring some, HP kind of boosting things, but it's never enough because sometimes you get poisoned. Well, this time around, Doduo basically pulls off the exact same thing that it did in Erica's gym and fully sweeps through Koga's gym. I don't even heal it going into him just because like today in Pokemon Yellow, since he's not like really a poison gym leader, at least not in this game, he's more of a bug leader. Drill Peck is just going to one-shot everything. And so there you have it. Koga, who sometimes is a real pain in the neck, today, not a problem whatsoever. And this bird continues on its little tiny path of destruction. And here is where, unfortunately, I kind of start losing the plot a little bit. I go to Silphco and I train against basically everyone there with the exception of Rival 5, knowing for sure that at the very least the Jolteon is going to destroy me, if not the Kadabra, if I don't outspeed it. So I just start working towards making sure that I am the fastest thing out there and that I can fully one-shot those things. My thought process was, I bet that the gym in Cinnabar will be easier. And then I have, obviously 3 resets here, and so that's kind of looking not really doable, and maybe it's because I'm setting up 3 times. Okay, great. So that's now a 4th reset. This is starting to look like I have fully put myself in a bad situation, and maybe I still have, I'll be honest, I don't know. But the idea that I finally have is, okay, maybe setting up 3 times to get to +6 is too much. So what if I set up twice, get to +4? My attack is still pretty significant. My speed is obviously significant. And Arcanine goes for takedown instead of Fire Blast, and so therefore we do in fact get that win, and I then can go up against Rival 5 the way that, I don't know, that Professor Oak intended. Now here we have it. I am finally very much leveled up. I also have a boost to my special, which should mean that I can outlive any of Cloyster's moves, specifically Aurora Beam in this case. The big problem here though is having the accuracy debuff is putting me at a significant loss here, and then leveling up in the middle of the fight is not really what you want to see in terms of then having the kind of crucial parts of this, as in like my attack stat, get dropped. That's the one thing that I don't think I've really fully thought of, was that I came back into this place with no real opportunities to level up before that fight without using a rare candy, which is not ideal either, but like I really need to save those for later, or at least that's kind of my mentality. I always save them for later if I can help it. Now here, this time I don't have an accuracy debuff, but I do get hit pretty hard by that Aurora Beam. And just by sort of brute forcing my way through, I barely survive, but I do get that win. So Doduo lives to continue on through to the top of Silphco. Here we go up against the Team Rocket Trio for the final time. It's okay. Well, I was just about to say it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and then of course I miss. But now it's, I guess, one lowercase 1, then 2, 3, 4. You know, I know that you can't do lowercase numbers, but listen, man, I'm doing my best. So then here, after that, we can go up against, I almost called him Koga. This is Giovanni. Do you see what the lowercase numbers do to you? They don't exist, and it kind of gives you a little internal brain error. Now, up against Giovanni's team, we have already gone up against him, and actually that team was harder, in my opinion. Maybe it's just because at this point we're even leveled higher. I don't know. But this actually goes by much smoother, and we also hit level 60 in this fight. So that should mean that the next 2 badges should go by pretty quickly. So our 7th today, but technically the 6th badge, is Sabrina. It'll be the last badge that we need before we can fight Giovanni one final time. So here we are finally very much more speedy, and it doesn't matter if our special is too low, as long as we don't somehow get debuffed, which we do not, and then we can just hit, and there you go. You have Abracadabra Alakazam, well, beat bada bing bada boom. Okay, and then I dig out and head to Viridian City for the final time so that we can go up against, also for the final time, Giovanni. At level 63, after a little bit of training here, we are going up against his team, and here is the idea. The idea is that Doug Trio does not really have anything that's super effective against me. The biggest problem that we face with it is the fact that it could use Sand Attack, which could lower our accuracy. And so that is something that we desperately need to avoid, because we're not effective against any of the Pokemon on his team. So we need to avoid all of those while also stat boosting and then getting ourselves set up as best as possible. Now, you might think to yourself, why are you just going to use agility? That's really only getting your speed up. Well, that is one of the key features of this game. And I told you earlier in the video that we would be coming back to it, and here is what I've promised. I also, by the way, in the meantime, have leveled up 6 times using 6 of the rare candies that I will find within this run. So that way we are a much higher level and hopefully getting through the Nidos with much more health. So in this generation, there is something called the badge boost glitch, which is that anytime you have a stat that has a badge that then boosts it, so the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th badge all boosting one of the stats, which you can see on the left hand side, anytime you then use a stat boosting item, or move rather, it will then accidentally recalculate those same boosts and re-add them on. So every time I go up +6, I'm going +3 because I'm going up 3 times on all of these other moves. So it is boosting my attack and luckily my defense, so that if we do get through to some of the Pokemon where we have Thunder, or like here, Rock Slide, which could be pretty devastating, we can barely get through. This is where he absolutely throws the fight. He uses a Guard Spec instead of going for Rock Slide one last time. And with those badge boosted stats, we barely get through. Doduo was kind of on the ropes there, but we get it done. This is one of those reasons why Generation 1 is fun and has like an interesting challenge, because there are little glitches and something to kind of help out with the fact that there's not a lot of great diversity in some of these move sets and everything like that. But then when you get to Generation 3 and the remakes, you don't get that boost. So, you might have better moves, but you're also going to have worse stats. So there's a lot of trade-offs within those things. And so now we get to go up against the final version of the rival team. The next time we see him, he will be a champion, and he will be a lot harder. The back half of his team is considerably the worst part for us here, specifically Cloyster and Jolteon. Those are the two that we are weak to. If we get lucky, which we do, we get a critical hit against the Cloyster. He is not an issue. Kadabra is also not a problem. Now, Jolteon could be a problem, but we also one-shot that one. So, for now, Doduo remains on the fringe of kind of moving forward in a fairly decent pace. After that, we make our way through all of Victory Road and then into Indigo Plateau. After dropping off all of our HM employees and then healing up, we're going to grab a couple of full restores and then use only a single rare candy, because I've already used 6 and I only have 5 left. And this is one of the rare occasions where I actually will want to guarantee that I don't level up in the middle of Bruno. Usually that doesn't matter to me, but it will today, just because he has a couple of rock type moves on those learn pools. So we got to make sure that we're ahead of that. So only using one, we get it to level 74 going in against Lorelei. Lorelei is super effective against us pretty much across the board, because every Pokemon except for Slowbro does have an ice type move. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we outlive that first Dugong situation. Okay, well, the point was that if you get set up, then you should be able to do a nice little sweep. However, you can, I guess, just get fully one-shot by a Cloyster still. Good to know. That's that type advantage coming into play. And again, still 20 levels over them. It goes to show that even with the badge boost, our special is just low enough that we're still struggling. Okay, and then that time it's made even worse by Dugong getting the one shot. Now, the biggest problem is that we can't really afford to change up our strategy. We don't have any other moves that we could learn. And even if I were to somehow go backwards and say, okay, I changed my mind, I will use Mimic, it's not really going to do anything for us. The best possible thing that we could grab here in this fight would be from Slowbro. And by that point, we're already pretty weakened and we would need to be set up to get to that point anyway. So there's no real point in trying to go through all of that. So it just kind of becomes a little bit of a, we need to have the best RNG possible type situation. And currently we're getting exactly that. We are down to 51 health and on to Lapras. If she hits us with Blizzard, we're in trouble, but she does not, because she goes for somehow a miracle preemptive super potion, which is not really how that works, but because of that, she throws the fight and we make it out. Up next is the ever over-glorified hiker Bruno. Look at this guy. He does have 2 Pokemon here that could probably one-shot me if they really went for the Rock Slide and hit. But they don't go for that. And so therefore we get to set up 3 times, which gives us a badge boost, glitch, boosted stat, baseline, I don't know. And so therefore when we go up against the other 3 Pokemon here that could be maybe problematic just because of their pure power, it's not really going to matter, because Drill Peck will outspeed and of course one-shot them, and then Body Slam will take care of the rest for the Onix, because yeah man, Bruno just sort of just like the Elite Four version of Surge. Maybe they're related. I've never thought to ask. Then we have Agatha. Agatha is exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? Which is just the concept of we have a person who can't do any damage to us, or at least not directly, not with the ghost type moves at all. But we do need to kind of circumvent some of the other situations that it has on this team. One of the big ones being Confused Ray, or any of the Supersonics as well. Now we also have to worry about Glare if we don't one-shot the Arbok, but that shouldn't be an issue. I imagine that there is no world in which Tri-Attack does not absolutely send Golbat and Arbok blasting off again at the speed of light, as if they were Team Rocket members, since they are poison types. And with that, all 3 of the ghost types go down. So at this point, we have to use one more rare candy, then heal up, and we're going to save right here in front of Lance. Lance actually surprisingly shouldn't be too bad. The biggest concern that I do have is actually Gyarados, not the two Dragonairs that do have a super effective move against us, because yep, well, that's exactly what I was thinking about. You see, my thought process is that in order to beat the Gyarados, I'm going to have to do some setup. And by the time I get those setups, the Dragonairs will become, well, not really a problem. But the Gyarados still has the option to one-shot me, or especially with a critical hit from Hyper Beam or Hydro Pump. Luckily, Hydro Pump does frequently miss, and so we get that sort of situation. We get a very perfect scenario in which it misses, and then it just sort of wastes a little bit of turns, and then it just goes for a Dragon Rage, which only drops us down by 40. So now we've got mostly perfect health going up against the Aerodactyl, who could also pose a small threat, but again, we've boosted all of our stats, so at this point, it comes down to, can the Dragonite get Thunder off? It cannot, and so therefore, we have defeated the Elite Four. The problem is, of course, as always, is there is still the champion, because someone did it before us. And so now we're going to have to go up against the most challenging version of this guy's team. Today, Butt has 3 Pokemon that could pose a little bit of a problem. Although the Sand Slash can hit pretty hard with Slash, I mean, he can get some critical hits and take us down exactly like that. One of the other things that we face here, so one of the things that you have to kind of look at when you go up against this team is also recognizing the moments in which you might have a better opportunity to set up. And my thought was that maybe I could do this against the Exeggutor. It's really maybe the only other Pokemon that I have an opportunity to do this against. But by that point, I'm nervous about getting past the Alakazam perfectly. And also, without the setup, can I really make it efficiently past that Sand Slash? I might be able to get lucky with some of the body slams on this guy, or maybe even a Tri-Attack, and potentially he might go for a Poison Sting like he has here and poison me. However, if I don't one-shot every single person from here on in, the biggest issue that we're going to face is that I will take damage. Okay, it doesn't matter because the Cloyster took me out. But the thing is that if I had one-shot that Cloyster, we would have been fine, because in Generation 1, you only take damage if a Pokemon that you have just attacked stays on the field. If it begins a new Pokemon, it kind of sees it as kind of like a new round, like the round never really completed, so it hasn't had an opportunity to hit you with that poison damage. Now, luckily, that is not a situation in which we have faced multiple times here. So far, he's only gotten the poison once. However, he has gotten me to extremely low health multiple times, which is a scary thing to see, especially when you have the Cloyster still in the back of the line there. There's a lot to be said here about this team, and it's exactly the issue that we were talking about earlier. There isn't really a strategy that we can change up that much. Potentially, if I was going to break my ruling and say, let's just go ahead and use Mimic, maybe Doduo cannot do it without Mimic, at that point, what do I really take? Sand Slash doesn't really have much to give me, and neither does the Alakazam or the Exeggutor. Potentially, I could have picked up the Recover move from Alakazam, but still, if the hits from Ice Beam are this damaging, can it really outlive all of those moves? No. Unfortunately, it's going to be a lot like the Lorelei fight. It's really going to come down to the best possible RNG in this fight. You're going to have to set up 3 times as best as possible against that Sand Slash and hope that you take the minimum amount of damage. So far, this is one of the most promising pieces that we've had. He's mostly gone for Poison Sting, which is great. Then we obviously one-shot the Alakazam here, and then you really need to make sure that you get rid of the Exeggutor with 1 hit, which shouldn't be hard because you've got Drill Peck. Now, luckily he goes for Aurora Beam here instead of Ice Beam. I think Ice Beam actually probably kills me, but luckily he chooses the slightly weaker move. I make it past the Ninetales, and even though I don't one-shot the Jolteon, he throws using Thunder Wave instead of Thunder. And therefore, Doduo, after a number of resets and a little bit of trouble, makes it through to the end and does it. And also, of course, with a time that is directly in between the Spearow and Pidgey runs, which also feels pretty good because both of those guys used Mimic and Doduo did not. So if we drop off some of those times that we were mentioning earlier, mostly around Team Rocket segments of this game, I do think that Doduo can beat both of them without Mimic, and that feels pretty great to me. Can't wait to come back to this one. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you enjoyed this content and you're not already subscribed, please consider hitting that button or liking, commenting, sharing. Any little interaction that you give to smaller creators such as myself always helps us out a lot. And speaking of helping out a smaller creator, specifically me, this weekend on my personal Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/ColinMParker, I will be doing a subathon to celebrate my birthday, which is Saturday, and Sunday, which is my affiliate anniversary for Twitch. All of it begins on Friday on that personal channel, as I mentioned before, at 4 p.m. Eastern. And so if you'd like to come hang out with some other folks and just sort of see what my variety content is like, feel free to drop in. Would love to have you. As always, be kind to yourself, be excellent to one another, and I will see you all next week for another solo challenge in Pokemon Yellow.